Welcome to the 3BN YouTube channel. We have been reading the book, The Secret Life of Baba Segi's Wives. And I tell you, it's picking up, the story is picking up slowly, right? In chapter 2, from our last episode, we saw that Bolanle gave us like a background story of before she met Baba Segi and after she met Baba Segi, and how 2 years down the line she has no child, the affection that Baba Segi had for her has reduced. Only one of the wives, the other three wives, is, kind of kind to her. The other two are still mean and all of that. And she said something in chapter 2 that struck me. She was like, she will buy the affection of all of these people that don't like her in this her new family with the money Baba Segi is giving her. So, well, I remember that chapter 1 ended with Bonale agreeing to go to the hospital with Baba Segi to go check out herself, see what's wrong with her. Is she truly barren? So that's what we're going to be moving on today. We're moving on to chapter 3, and it is titled Heavy Period. Baba Segi yelled frantically as he scrambled down the corridor to Bolanle's room. Iya Segi, help me! I can't find Bolanle. We were supposed to go to the hospital today. Where is she? What have you lost, Baba Segi? Iya Segi flung her room door open. It's Bolanle. She's gone. She must have run away in the middle of the night. All the money I have spent on her is wasted. My graduate is gone. One leg was in his trousers, the other was caught in the waistband, so he was hopping along, sweat dripping from his bare chest. Have you looked in her bedroom? Iya Segi tried to join in the panic, but her words came out too slowly, too comfortably. I have looked everywhere. These educated girls, they take your money and they abandon you. After all you've done for her, what a wretch. She has run off with another man, no doubt. Baba, she's here, asleep in the living room. Shaggy leaned into the corridor with soap suds all the way up to her elbows. Where? Let me see for myself. Bolanle, Bolanle. Shaggy hopped into the living room and his eyes fell on Bolanle, who was lying in Iya Tope's armchair with her eyes closed. By now, the other wives too had gathered at the mouth of the corridor and were trying to make sense of the furor. They watched Baba Segi grab Bolanle by the shoulders and shake her. She is here, alive! Thank the gods! He exclaimed. Iya Segi retraced her steps to her room without making a sound. I am awake now, Bolanle gasped, so Baba Segi wouldn't crease the pink stripes on her shoulder pads. Iyafemi flicked on the lights, and for the first time, Baba Segi caught a glimpse of Bolanle's face. She had clearly been extra careful in applying her makeup. Her eyebrows were penciled in so that they were symmetrical, not like the slapdash jagged lines Iyafemi sketched on her face. She had lined her lips with burgundy and used the tip of her pinky to apply a sheer coat of gold to their fullness. Her skirt suit was well cut, but 2 years without soft scoop ice cream had made the waistband a little roomy. Her toes were edged into a pair of fuchsia slip-ons. Baba's hands shot upward as if the pink stripes were hot iron rods. Without another word, he stood up straight and marched to his bedroom. Iyatope too returned to her bedroom. Iyafemi rushed after Shegi. She wanted to know every detail. Bolanle just smoothed back her hair and smiled. At 6 o'clock, Taju rapped on the metal door frame. Bolanle had fallen asleep again. The rapping grew louder until Iyafemi barged in from the kitchen, making as much noise as she could with the keys. I don't know how some people sleep like they are dead. She tightened the wrapper over her bosom. Let me open the door for you, Mr. Taju. Some people do not know that you are Bale, head of your own household. Thank you, Iyafemi. Good morning. I hope you woke well. Let's just say that we woke and leave it at that. She shot a sweeping side glance in Bolanle's direction. What about you? The padlock came off and then the chain. Who would see your face and not wake well anyway? Taju lowered his voice to a whisper and hummed his appreciation of her bare skin, glistening from the morning humidity. Mr. Taju, one would think he had not just pressed your body from your wife's embrace. Anyway, it is good that you have come on time. I think Baba Segi wants to leave early this morning. They both laughed, and Iyashegi walked back into the sitting room with Taju close behind her. Taju had only ever been late once, about a year ago, when he had arrived with his shirt slung over his left shoulder and nail marks across his forehead. Ejecting a toothpick from between his teeth and pushing it into his afro, he claimed that he had beaten his wife senseless for letting his only son suck on a coin. This happened about a week after a male senator slapped a female colleague. The slap had resonated through all the quiet morning rooms of the Senate building and into the heart of every man on the street. It seemed to awaken a loosely fettered beast. Of course, the male senator blamed the devil for his actions, and the two senators were soon seen embracing on national television. The same could not be said for the man on the street. Men were slapping their women folk as if it had become a national sport. At every street corner, disgruntled wives swung suitcases onto their heads, hoping to be persuaded to return home. At the marketplace, the Igbo fabric merchants tugged women roughly by the sleeve. Peeved taxi drivers prodded the heads of mothers who bargained with them. Young girls were assaulted and stripped naked in the streets. Even in the labor wards, baby girls were frowned upon by their fathers. Taju too was inspired to throw his best punch. When Baba Segi finally summoned Bolanle, she was fast asleep, dreaming of Shegun, a boy from her past. It was the same dream she always had. He was standing in the middle of a busy dance floor, beckoning to her. She would start making her way toward him, but he would reach into his breast pocket and throw a fistful of small golden nuggets high into the air. Suddenly, all the women in the disco would abandon their partners for Shegun's side, and Bonale would then be left standing there, unable to make out his physique underneath the mountain of miniskirts and low-cut tops. "We must be there by 6:50. Bashegi opened the door slightly, rammed his words in, and disappeared. Before Bonale could finish fastening the buckles on her sandals, she heard the front door slam shut. Babashagi was talking to Taju through the open window of the pickup when she finally caught up with him. "Get in," he ordered, barely giving her enough room to press through. "Next to Mr. Taju. If you don't want to sit next to me, you can sit in the back. Only the wind is uncomfortably cool at this time of the morning," Taju retorted. Babashagi looked at Taju and grinned. Bonale might have been going to the hospital dressed like a graduate, but his driver could still put her in her place. As Bonale squeezed between the two men, Babashagi plotted ways in which he could keep her in the shadows, ways to keep her makeup face out of the daylight. He was determined to render her efforts useless. As they approached the end of their street, the night guard saluted. He ordered them to wait and reached beyond the front tires to remove a plank that was riddled with long rusty nails. He raised the metal bar meant as a deterrent to the armed robbers who used to terrorize the neighborhood. Babashagi took a 50 naira note from a black leather pouch and thrust it into the night guard's hand. The guard took off his hat and waved. They made their way towards Strongo Road with the mental race attached to the pickup rattling behind them. Taju knew the road well and navigated with the precision of a wasp. He skimmed the rims of the large potholes, throwing his passengers within an inch of their seats. The minute they turned into Shongoro, they spotted policemen. One of them was putting out the flames on the kerosene-filled cans that had lit up their makeshift checkpoints. Two more policemen were emptying out the night takings from their pockets and exchanging swigs from a portable bottle of Napoleon Chevalier. Their guns lay on the ground swaddled by black raincoats. When the policeman blowing out the flames saw them approaching, he put down the lamp he was holding and raised his baton. "Hold it!" he yelled. He didn't lower his baton or open his eyes until the pickup hood was within half a yard of his worn black trousers. "Where are you going this early morning? Are you criminals?" He peered at them through the passenger window. His eyes softened briefly when they fell on Bolanle, but when she didn't engage his gaze, he resumed his interrogation. "Who are you? Identify yourselves." "Sergeant, I am Mr. Atonda Alao. We are going to UCH." Babashegi smiled sheepishly as his hand crept towards his black pouch. "Who is sick?" the policeman inquired, feigning interest. He too had spotted the bulging pouch and the tentative journey Babashegi's hand was making towards it. Both Babashegi and Taju looked at Bolanle. The policeman's eyes were squarely fixed on the blue 50 naira note edging toward his open palm. He looked in the direction of his colleagues. When he was certain they were still bent over the raincoats, he shoved his crutch into the passenger window and stuffed the note into it. His zip was within 2 inches of Baba Segi's face. Bolanle stared at the man's midsection, interested to see if he would top his own crudeness. "Drive!" the policeman commanded, swooping on the taxi behind them. When the policemen were out of sight, Baba Segi leaned out of the car and spat into a large pothole. There was no food in his belly, but he still had to empty himself. Bolanle glanced at him, but he rejected unconcerned and wiped his lips with the back of his hand. Baba Segi could never keep things in. He was open-ended. His senses were directly connected to his gut, and what didn't agree with him had a way of accelerating his digestive system. Bad smells, bad news, and the sight of anything vaguely repulsive had an expulsive effect. What went in through his mouth recently shot out through his mouth, and what was already settled in his belly sped through his intestines out of his rear end. Only after clearing his digestive system could Baba Segi regain calm. Once, when his shop assistants came to tell him that his shop had been burgled, he listened attentively while they read out the list of what had been stolen. Then, tensing his buttocks, he strode to the toilet. Within minutes, he reappeared with all tension gone from his face. All I can say is that what has happened has happened. This was not the philosophical response the perplexed employees expected. They looked at each other and wondered if Baba Segi was still suffering from shock. Bolanle hugged her elbows. Taju had discovered a new way or method of rankling her. Every time he changed gears, he leaned his arm close to her breast. In the distance, an old train snorted and let out the gaps before it commenced its daily chugging. Shango Road was waking up. Minibus drivers were starting up their vehicles and spilling out of the overcrowded motor parks. Women with sleeping babies on their backs swept out their marketplace stalls and tottered at the sight of cigarette butts and broken bottles, leftovers of the night's revelry. The University College Hospital had a horrible reputation. Patients being taken there would bid their loved ones farewell. The lack of government funding, coupled with the misappropriation of the little the hospital generated, had left the buildings dilapidated. Crucial medical tests were rationed, and the doctors refused patients who had not brought their own medicine. The only reason people went there rather than the thousands of back alley clinics was they could be sure the doctors had proper medical degrees. Bolanle knew they were close as soon as she saw the palm trees that lined the main entrance and shielded early morning mourners from the sun's unyielding rays. There were always tears at the gate because it was here that the news of death was passed on to broken-hearted family members. Here, there was no risk of them throwing themselves over the hospital's many balconies. Beside this, the main gate was an awkward place for mourners to make a scene. There were too many people wrapped up in their own problems, so the mourners sat on big round boulders and wept silently. "Where can I park?" Taju asked one of the security guards positioned around the gate to enforce organized grieving. "Do I look like a parking attendant?" barked the man as he walked away. "Sorry, I thought you were here to work. I didn't realize this was your father's living room," Taju hissed as he drove off, tires screeching. Before the guard could turn and wag a finger, they were negotiating the roundabout in front of the main building. They must have driven around for 10 minutes in search of a parking space before Baba Segi finally suggested that Taju let them out. "There is a space there, sir," Taju said, pointing at an empty spot under a sign that said mortuary. "Are you sure you want to park there?" "No problem, sir. I will stay here in the car. Nothing will happen." Taju reassuringly beating his chest like he had dominion over the ghosts that lay beyond the big grey door and whatever mischief they might have had in mind. "Well, at least we know where to find you. We shouldn't be too long." "Go well, sir." Taju ignored Bonale. He ruffled his hair for a toothpick and inserted it into his teeth. When Bonale and Baba Segi reached the top of the first flight of stairs, the landing opened up into a long corridor that stretched out in both directions. Baba Segi glimpsed a figure in a white coat and ran to him. Doctor, I need somebody to help me. It's my wife's womb," he panted. The medic surveyed Bonale's waistline and inquired if she was in labor. "No," Bonale replied. Before Baba Segi could further emulate her, she added calmly, "We are here to seek medical advice." "I see," the doctor said, nodding. "Is this your first time at UCH?" "I have never had reason to come here before. Ogun bears witness," Baba Segi blurted. Addressing Bolanle, the doctor gave them directions. You will need to go to the general outpatients department. Go to the end of this corridor and turn left, down the stairs. Go to the end of that corridor and you'll see a big sign that says General Outpatients. It's written in blue, you can't miss it. Furious at the way the doctor stared at his wife, Baba Segi grabbed Bolanle by the elbow. Go your way, we'll find it ourselves. The astonished doctor watched as he dragged Bolanle off in the wrong direction. Bolanle snatched her arm from his grip and led the way. Each time they walked past the hospital clock, Baba Segi would tap the face of his wristwatch and frown in bewilderment. Bolanle shook her head as they approached the sign that read General Outpatients Department. The clocks have stopped, Baba Segi. It's not a miracle, neither is it magic. The clocks have simply stopped. Baba Segi looked at his watch one last time and lowered his arms to his sides. A doctor was perched on the edge of a table in front. He turned linked fingers out above his head and yawned. Opposite him, a nurse sat upright on a plastic chair. The doctor yawned again and only made to cover his mouth as his lips were closing. One arm of his glasses was held in place with a band-aid, and his beard was disheveled. So are you going home to sleep all by yourself? The doctor placed her arms underneath her breast so that they jutted out. Her uniform was crisp and angelic. They both turned when a well-dressed young man approached, showed by a huffing middle-aged man. The doctor scratched his head and headed back to his consultation table. Can I help you? The nurse's tone was friendly despite her small frown. There were voices in the background, other doctors holding consultations with their patients. Sister, it is this wife of mine who needs your help, Baba Segi said. What is your name? The nurse brought out a fresh pink folder from the desk she rested on. Bolanle Alao, Baba Segi replied. Date of birth? The nurse looked at Bolanle strangely. January 19, 1976. Baba Segi blurted again. Sir, is there a reason why she cannot answer herself? Is she deaf? The questions were directed at Baba Segi, but the nurse looked past him at Bolanle. I am my husband. That doesn't mean anything to us, sir. We want to hear from the patient. How old are you now? Bolanle moved toward the edge of a blue plastic chair and whispered, 25. And what brings you here today? She knew what Baba Segi wanted to hear. I'm barren. Is this your first visit to a hospital about this matter, or were you referred? This is my first visit. Address, number 1 Sabiu Street, Shongo. Religion, Christian. Level of education, BA University graduate. The nurse looked up at her and then glanced briefly at Baba Segi, next of kin. For a moment, Bolanle went blank. All her life it had been her mother, the one person who would stop everything and run to her aid. Bolanle remembered the last conversation they had had before she left for Baba Segi's house. Have you lost your brain? After I scraped my salary together, month after month, to put you and your sister through university, you want to betray me? Her mother asked. It was 4 o'clock in the morning and she was due to move to Baba Segi's house later that day. Mama, I'm doing what is best for me. Bolanle had rehearsed her answer. Is that what this is all about? Is it the prospect of stuffing fat into your mouth that has led you into this? If that is so, Bolanle, remember all the days that I slaved for you. Cast your mind back to all that I deprived myself of for you and your sister. Have you not learned anything from the words that have fallen from my mouth all these years? Is your back broken that you cannot sow what you seek to reap from this man's table? I'm doing what is best for me, Mama. Please write, Mr. Atondo Alao. Baba Segi shouted now. I am my next of kin. You should have stayed in your father's house if you wanted your mother to be your next of kin. Bolanle raised a palm to her mouth to prevent any more words from flying out. She had not realized she had said her mother's name. The nurse drew a line across what she had written and started over. Her writing was swift yet leisurely, clear with no sharp angles. She handed the empty folder to Bolanle. Go to cubicle 5. She pointed to the empty cubicle even though the number 5 was emblazoned on a white A4 sheet and tacked to the door. Baba Segi kept his eye on the pink folder. Hold it tight, he mumbled. The doctor's eyes were bloodshot, but they responded to every sound in the room. As soon as the couple walked in, he stood up to take the pink folder from Bolanle and offered them the seats on the other side of the table. I am Dr. Usman. My job is to try to understand the nature of your ailment so I can refer you to one of our specialists. You mean we wasted our time coming here? Why can we not go straight to the special doctor? I am a very busy man, you know, and this is a very serious matter. Baba Segi had jumped to his feet. Bolanle put a hand on her face and kneaded her eyebrows with her fingertips. The doctor spotted it. She tugged at Baba Shegi's sleeve, but he threw her hand off. Dr. Usman spotted that too. Baba Shegi slowly sat back down in his own time. The doctor wanted so badly to roll his eyes that he had to raise his eyebrows to stop himself. He didn't want to appear condescending, if only for the sake of the young woman sitting opposite him. "I'm sorry, sir, but unfortunately no specialist in this hospital will see you unless you have seen us first. That is why we are here. That is the way things work." Baba Shegi folded his arms and rocked on his seat, all the time mumbling. "I presume you're husband and wife," the doctor inquired, preparing to scrawl across a blank sheet of paper. A fist moved to Baba Shegi's wrist. "Yes, she's my wife." "Very good. So, Mrs. Alao?" "Yes." Bolanle responded tentatively. No one had ever called her that before. "How long have you been married?" "Nearly 3 years," Baba Shegi replied. "Bolanle, how old were you when you started menstruating?" "I was 13. "And how long do you normally menstruate for?" "How many days each month, I mean?" 4 to 5 days. "Heavy or light?" Baba Shegi couldn't hold back. "Do you not know that you are talking to another woman's wife? All these questions you are asking are meaningless. She is barren." "Mr. Alao, I'm conducting a medical investigation on my patient. The only reason you are allowed to be here is that she has permitted it." He shot Bolanle a sympathetic look. "If you cannot conduct yourself properly, I will have to ask you to leave. Just remember that she's somebody's wife. Oh. Now, I was asking about your... They are always heavy," Bolanle replied. "Very good. And are they painful?" "No, not at all." "Good. Do you and your husband have regular coitus?" "What is the meaning of coitus? Don't think the two of you can bamboozle me because I do not go to university," Owashegi said. Bolanle smiled wryly and shook her head. "I was asking Mrs. Alao how frequently you have sexual relations. She gets her ration on Tuesdays and sometimes she gets an extra day, no less, no more than any of my other wives. It's her womb that is not working. Coitus once a week." The doctor pronounced each syllable, then looked long and hard at Baba Shegi to emphasize that his embellishment was neither required nor helpful. "There are other wives, and you are wife number..." "She's number 4. Baba Shegi held up fat forefingers. "Number 4. "I take it that there are other children. I know it is bad luck to say how many, but perhaps you could tell me roughly how many children you have." "You dare to call my children rough?" "No, sir. I mean approximately, an estimate." "How many?" "Over 15, over 10, over 5. Dr. Usman exhaled sharply. "Many more than 5, but fewer than 10. I would have had more than 10 now if this woman's womb was not hostile to my seed." The doctor leaned back into the old leather seat. The fabric was cracking like shattered glass. Mrs. Alao had "How long have you been sexually active?" Silence. Bolanle's mind reeled. Did false starts count, or was he referring to consensual sex? "Mrs. Alao, when did you have your first sexual encounter?" the doctor asked again. I was the first. I was 15 and 8 months, 4 months before my 16th birthday." "Ha!" Baba Shegi placed both palms on the top of his head and began to hum at an unsettling pitch. Dr. Usman threw his pen on the folder and tightened his brow. "Listen, Mr. Alao, you are obstructing this consultation. Plus, I believe you are intimidating my patient." "Your patient?" Baba Shegi sneered. "She's my wife. Am I not the one who has married her? Why should you care?" Dr. Usman often had to ask mothers, husbands, sisters to wait outside the cubicle, so he picked up the receiver of the phone and made to press a red button. "I'm afraid I'm going to invite security to..." "Please, doctor, let's continue." It was not so much the sound of Bolanle's voice, but the volume that made Dr. Usman replace the receiver. "As you please, Mrs. Alao. Now, have you ever been pregnant?" Baba Shegi turned his entire belly toward Bolanle. A nerve shuddered down his leg and set his right foot in motion, making the sole of his slipper slap the linoleum flooring. "Yes," Bolanle said. The slipper slapping stopped abruptly. The doctor continued. "How many times?" "Once. The pregnancy was terminated." Bolanle stared ahead. "Can you tell me where the procedure took place?" I don't remember. It was done by a nurse somewhere near Mokola." "I don't remember." Dr. Usman braced himself when Baba Shegi raised his hand. He thought he was going to strike his wife, but instead the older man opened his mouth and bawled, "Where is your toilet?" over and over again. Dr. Usman shoveled him out of the cubicle and in the direction of the men's room. Back in the cubicle, Bonale rummaged through her handbag and Dr. Usman pretended to read over his notes. Eventually, Baba Segi pushed the cubicle door open. He looked subdued and the strain was gone from his face. "I'll be in the pickup," he whispered. "Doctor, when you buy guavas in the marketplace, you cannot open every single one to check for rottenness. And where you find rottenness, you do not always throw away the guava. You bite around the rot and hope that it will quench your craving." "Mr. Alao, it's admirable that you have taken this attitude because this is by no means the end. We are hardly at the beginning. There is a lot to be done before you can even conclude that the guava is rotten. There are tests we must do." Strangely, his heart went out to Baba Segi. He looks like he had been struck with a big whip. "Tell her what she must do next." With that, he waddled out of the door and let it close by itself. The hem of his trousers mopped the length of the corridor. "Mrs. Alao, I don't want you to worry," the doctor reassured Bonanle. "We haven't seen anything conclusive yet. We haven't even looked. But bearing in mind all you have told me, I have a few suggestions that might bring us closer to a diagnosis. You will need to have a pelvic ultrasound, and there is always the risk of damage to the wall of the womb if the procedure isn't done by a qualified surgeon. This often leads to fibrosis, adhesions on the wall of the womb. As you can imagine, a scarred womb is not conducive to fetal development. Dr. Dibia is the gynecologist you will see. His clinics are on Mondays. I'll give you a referral letter which you must take to the O&G department on your way out of here. They will check his timetable and book you in. When you return, be sure to bring the results of your pelvic ultrasound with you. You would also need to do these blood tests. Bring those results as well." He glanced up from his form filling to find Bolanle absent-mindedly pressing a pimple on her face. "Mrs. Alao, there is no reason to be worried." "I'm not. I'm listening to every word you are saying." "Good. Are you going to be alright? Your husband seemed a little agitated. Is there somewhere you can go?" "I'll be fine. What more can he do to me? He can't humiliate me any more than he has done already. His other wives can't be any more hostile to me. He's my husband and I will return to his house." "The environment you have described does not sound very healthy to..." Bolanle did not let him finish. "It is good that he has heard the things I said today. Perhaps they should have been said before. The world turns and we do too within it. Who can say what sins pursue us?" She took the referral letter and the test request forms from the table. "Thank you, doctor." Back at the car, Taju could see that his boss was not in the mood for talking, and he couldn't help but wonder why he was carrying the stench of loosened bowels. Bonanle, for her part, approached the vehicle with peace in her eyes. "Take us home," Babashagi barked. "I would like to be dropped off at Awolowo Road Junction so I can visit my parents. Then we will take you to your father's gate. I think it would be better if you went home to change first." Babashagi looked at his trousers and shifted to the middle of the seat. He reasoned that it would be less irksome if he sat in the middle as opposed to sitting by the door. He didn't want her to stand up to let Bonanle out. Bonanle pointed her nose outside the window for fresh air. They drove past Shongo and stopped at Awolowo Junction. As always, there were girls standing under the tree hoping to flag down a taxi. No one wanted to brave the sun and trudge to the taxi stand. Bonanle reached for the handle, not caring that Taju was listening. She turned to Baba Segi, one foot firmly placed on the cobbled pavement. "We have to go back next Monday. Our appointment is at 10 a.m. and we'll be seeing a different doctor." She flashed the appointment card and the test request. "When will you be back home?" It was still too early for him to return to anything related to doctors and hospitals. "In the evening, probably around 6. Do not be late for family time." Wow, chapter 3 is gone. Can you believe it? Well, maybe Bonale ain't barren after all, because apparently she has been pregnant before when she was younger and she aborted the baby because she said the pregnancy was terminated while answering the doctor's questions. So, in our next episode, we're going to see where this leads. We're going to move on to chapter 4. This is 3BN YouTube channel. Stay with us. I am Nelly Atari, the voice that you were hearing. So, enjoy the rest of your day.